Hi, everyone. Today we are going to discuss the U.S. entrance into World War One. If you haven't already, make sure that you open up the notes that are on Canvas. Those notes go along with this PowerPoint that we're going to be taking a look at today. And I'd like you to fill out those notes. There are blanks within the information that will coincide with what is being told to you, what you're going to see on this PowerPoint. So I want you to be filling out those notes as we go. All right, so here we go. United States enters World War One. Right, our president at the time was a guy named Woodrow Wilson, and he was very opposed to the idea of imperialism. We have talked about imperialism, how it was a cause of the First World War. Woodrow Wilson didn't like imperialism because he believed that went against democracy, and that democracy was something that was necessary to keep a nation stable and continuing to move forward. He also believed that imperialism created war and revolution, which he believed needed to come to an end as well. Prior to Woodrow Wilson's presidency, there was a revolution going on actually in Mexico, when its leader, a guy named Porfirio Diaz, he was overthrown, and he was actually forced to leave the country for his own safety. The new guy, the new leader, Francisco Madero, he was not the greatest president in the world. He was pretty ineffective, to a point where he was actually overthrown as well by Victoriano Huerta, who took over Mexico, and it is suspected that he actually had Madero murdered. Wilson, because of the violent way that Huerta took over Mexico, Wilson refused to recognize this as a legitimate government. So this created some tension between Mexico and the United States. Then in 1914, when Wilson was president, he actually sent troops to Mexico, to Veracruz, to overthrow Huerta. A lot of Mexican people didn't appreciate the fact that we were using our military to overthrow their leader, which I think is understandable. But it got to a point where a mediator from a third party had to come in and kind of fix the situation for us. And through this mediator, they decided that a guy named Venustiano Carranza, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but Venustiano Carranza was going to be Mexico's new president. There were still Mexican people who did not care for Carranza. And as a result, they actually started to conduct raids into the United States to kind of get our attention. Kind of an odd strategy. But one of the people that was in charge of these raids, probably the most infamous one, is a guy named Pancho Villa. And he would lead these guerrilla attacks on villages in New Mexico, where they would attack a village that's kind of isolated, destroy some things, steal some things. Some people were killed, and then they'd flee back into Mexico. Obviously, Woodrow Wilson is not going to just stand by and let this happen. So he employs the work of John Pershing, who's a high-ranking American military officer, to go to Mexico with about 6,000 troops and capture Pancho Villa. Ultimately, Pershing was unsuccessful. And when World War I broke out, Pershing was recalled back to the United States because he, again, was a very high-ranking officer, and they were going to need him if the United States ever got involved in the war. But all of these 3 years from 1911 to 1914, it really damages our relationship with Mexico. And you might be asking yourself, I thought we were talking about World War I. Believe me, this issue with Mexico will come up again. Okay, so speaking of World War I, when it broke out, America was neutral. Wilson declared our neutrality. He didn't want to get involved in a foreign war. We kind of isolate ourselves. However, Americans as citizens, we were a little bit more partial to one side or the other. we have a lot of immigrants that live in the United States that were kind of supporting their homelands, um, especially in the area we live. We are a very heavily German American area. So there were there were a number of people that were supporting Germany in World War One, but for the most part, Americans favored the Allied cause. We have a pretty close relationship with Britain and with France. France, is one of our oldest allies. Britain is probably our closest ally. So we're kind of leaning towards the Allied cause here. President Wilson's cabinet, all right, his closest staff that he works with on a fairly daily basis, they believe that in order to maintain the balance of power in the world, that Britain needed to come out victorious here. They needed to make sure that Britain won. The British also used things like propaganda, not only in their own country, but there was actually British propaganda within the United States to kind of sway public opinion to support the British. Because if the American people were in support of the British, there would be a larger likelihood that we would get involved on the British side. You can see an example of British propaganda. Companies, like businesses, also kind of had more of a tie to the Allies. A lot of American banks had actually loaned money to the Allied countries to help fight the war. A lot of American businesses, sold things to the Allied countries. And they kind of started to realize that, we're only going to get this, like especially the banks, we're only going to get this money back that we let them borrow if they win. If they don't win, there's a really good chance that they're not going to be able to pay back the money that they borrowed. Okay. So while a lot of Americans supported the British side of the war, a lot of companies supported the British side of the war, even a lot of high government officials supported the British side of the war, we still did not want to get involved. It still was not our war. We just wanted one side to win over the other, but we didn't necessarily want to get involved. It wasn't our fight. Then it starts to affect us. Okay, the British Navy is actually blockading Germany to keep supplies from getting to Germany through the sea. The British began to redefine contraband. Contraband is like prohibited materials, like war materials. So they began to stop ships that were going to Germany, and this included American ships, but they began to stop these merchant ships from getting to Germany. So Germany had to figure out a way around this blockade, but instead of going around it, they decided they were going to go under it. This is where they employ their famed U-boats, all right, which stands for Unterseeboot, which means underwater boat in German. Germany essentially threatened to sink any ship that entered the waters around Britain. Right? They kind of thought, hey, we'll fight fire with fire. You're going to blockade our country, then we will sink any ship that is headed towards yours. This happened to include some civilian ships. And this is in a direct violation of an international treaty that when in international waters, or you just don't attack civilian ships. And this particular ship was named the Lusitania. It was a British passenger liner that was sunk by the Germans off the coast of Britain. And 1,200 people died, including 128 Americans. And this is going to obviously upset both Britain and the United States, but especially the United States, because we're kind of looking at this as we're not involved in this war, yet our people are dying. That's not okay. So the Americans basically told the Germans, you're going to have to stop this. Germany's like, you know what? We probably don't want America getting involved at the moment. So we are going to we're gonna agree to stop. And this is called the Sussex Pledge. The promise that Germany made to stop sinking ships just at random, the merchant ships or civilian ships. And this seemed to appease the United States. It kind of that's what they wanted to hear. But it didn't last for long. Sorry, I should probably explain this picture. Um, this was essentially a telegram in February of 1917 that basically said that the Germans were going to continue um, with their what was called unrestricted submarine warfare. Okay, this is known as the Zimmerman telegram. Okay, and that's explained here on this slide. A German officer, a guy named Arthur Zimmerman, he got a hold of the German ambassador in Mexico and told him to go to the Mexican government and make an offer. And this is where our relationship with Mexico kind of comes into play here. Again, it's not a great one. We're kind of at odds with Mexico at this point. All right. But the idea was the offer that Germany made Mexico was that Mexico aligns itself with Germany. They become allies with Germany. Okay. If the United States were to get involved in this war with Germany, Mexico should invade the United States to keep them occupied. In exchange, once Germany is done winning in Europe, they would come to the United States and help Mexico defeat the United States. And for their efforts, they would get back a lot of the land that they had lost over the years to the United States. Right, including Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. They even actually told Mexico, "Hey, if you can, get Japan in on this as well. They can help you out." This telegram was intercepted by British intelligence and leaked to American newspapers. So the American public found out about this and were clearly and rightfully so outraged by this new development. All right, and part of the telegram, I'm going to go back a slide here. All right, was that we intend to begin on the 1st of February unrestricted submarine warfare. So they basically said, yeah, we're going to break the Sussex Pledge. They told us in the Zimmerman the telegram, or not, I guess didn't tell us, but they told Mexico, and we found out about it. They were planning on breaking the promise that they had made to stop attacking merchant ships. And so in February of 1917, Germany upheld that message, and they began to attack merchant ships again. And soon after, American ships were sunk. So on April 6th of 1917, the United States declared war against Germany, and we are officially involved in World War I.